We're in. Here we go. Thanks, Stuart, for coming on.
Morning. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you as well?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Good. I think this is my
Good.
it's actually my first live interview, so you'll have to be gentle with
No,
me.
yeah. No, me too. Me too. We'll try to stick to the schedule and run through it all. As kind of like an introduction, I've kind of been working with you for 3 years, two and a half.
Yeah, 2.5 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, I was working with Stuart as a candidate before he joined where he's at now. And yeah, you've kind of been a hiring manager. We placed a few engineers with you in that time. And I thought it would just be really useful for everyone to come on and kind of learn about your experiences and everything as well. So if you want to introduce yourself and your background, that'd be good.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stuart Marsh. I'm currently CTO at Qmata. We're a startup in the insurtech space. I'm also an executive coach, and I guess and author now because I've just released the book. I won't go too far into my backstory because I think we're probably going to cover that. But I'm married with 5 kids. I live on the south coast of England.
Bit of a struggle getting a book out with 5 kids, was it?
They're all getting a bit older now, though. So I mean, of the 5, the youngest is like 13. So I've not got toddlers running around. It would have been more of a struggle then, I think.
Yeah, just so everyone knows as well, if anyone wants to pop in any comments into the chat, so we can run through some questions at the end, and just we'll probably cover a lot of stuff. But if anyone's got any questions just to go through at the end, then that would be quite a good thing for us to go through as well. So running through kind of your career, I know obviously you've had a bit of a unusual start into software engineering. Well, some would say unusual, but a less common path into software engineering. So if you could run through that as well and just explain kind of how you got into it and a bit more about kind of what you were doing before, that might be quite interesting for a few of the kind of viewers.
Sure. I'll have to go way back now. So I'm 48, and so this starts way back when I left school at 17. So left school, I did 1 year of A levels, and then just decided that that wasn't for me, and I wanted to leave and be a musician, which is quite away from where I am now. I played guitar and went to work in a music shop, and suffice to say, I taught guitar for a while, but the dreams of being the rock star didn't really pan out as maybe I'd have hoped at 17. I think at the time I wasn't really. I had. For those who are old enough to remember things like Spectrums and Commodores, so I had a Spectrum Plus 2 where you load up your data from an actual audio cassette, and I did just very simple basic programming, but nothing really. I was more into playing the games, and then didn't really do anything much more with computers for sort of quite a few years. As a guitar teacher, did that for a couple of years, and then decided I wanted something a bit more stable. I met my sort of future wife when I was about 19, and wanted something more stable. So decided to join the police, which seems a bit of a random change. It wasn't really something that I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't, a childhood dream to be a police officer, but it seemed like a good progression for me. It had good pay, and I think I was quite nervous. Not a nervous person. I was always struggled with confidence in sort of new situations back then. So it was quite a leap to do that, but I think it really helped. Being in the police really helped with that. So I spent nearly 11 years working in the Met. Worked in just south of Heathrow Airport, and I worked in Kilburn and Harlesden, which is sort of northwest London, a bit more of a difficult area to police. While I was there, so I joined in '96. And around about, I think, 98, 99, I bought my first PC. Obviously started playing the games, Tomb Raider and Half-Life and all those sorts of things. And then it was sort of getting bored with, what it could do and looking at what else this computer could do. Started teaching myself a bit of programming. I think I got a Visual Basic. Used to get these big, thick books on, learn to program in 21 days and it would come with a CD. So this thing came with a CD, with Microsoft Visual Basic. Started to learn that. Started to do other things. Like I used to mess around with Linux and used to buy magazines that would have Linux on the cover and trying to get that installed. Then I moved over and started learning things like PHP and MySQL to actually build websites and sort of web apps. This would have been around sort of 2000, 2001. I did managed to do a little bit of freelance web development and web design and got into it that way. Sort of, the internet was really, the World Wide Web, I guess, was really sort of taking off then.
Was there any part of kind of when you were in the Met, like a technical aspect of that, or was it purely just off the back? You thought you'd just learn to code?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I'd always been interested in learning new things. I guess that's where the guitar came from. Progressing at a skill and learning that. Coding was. I think I actually at one point there was an advert in the paper from, I can't remember what the company was called now, but they were doing training courses for I think it was for C++ at the time, and it was one of these. It was an advert in the paper, and it was like a little square where you had to solve a puzzle. I can't remember what it was now, like Sudoku, but I guess it was designed to make you feel like you were smart. Then you'd call them up and say, "I passed your test," and then they actually came to the house to say, "Well, we've got this big training course," but it was like £4,000 or £5,000, which was at the time, it still is quite a lot of money. I looked into as well doing like an open university degree to learn, to get a computer science degree. But that, trying to do a full-time job and do that, it would take a long time. I did a year of it, but then I just thought this isn't going to really take me anywhere. So there wasn't really much of a technical aspect to the work in the Met. There were some computer systems, but nothing sort of programmer wise. So it was really just me trying to do a bit of freelance work, but it was quite clear at that point when you look through job adverts for computer programmers or web developers, it was almost always, that you need a degree to do this. It was always a requirement, computer science degree, some kind of degree. So I can't for sort of 6 or 7 years do a degree, and the degrees at the time as well, they would teach you maybe. They might teach you Java, or they might teach you. There was one it would teach Smalltalk, so object-oriented programming. That didn't really relate to anything you would actually do when you got out there, so it didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. So I guess
what were the kind of? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on. You go.
I was going to say, what were the kind of like the main challenges that you faced? Obviously, getting into, because I speak to software engineers all the time they've not done a traditional like computer science, maths, or physics or something where you would be programming in that degree. They've come from something to do like English or psychology. So it's obviously they've had a degree. I know yours is a little bit different. How did you go about making sure that, because the end goal was obviously to get where you are now. How did you go about doing that at the start?
So I think for me, really, it was just about just learning as much as I could and getting as much experience as I could outside of a job. So if I couldn't get someone to employ me as a programmer, it's, well, how much stuff can I learn? What projects can I do, even just for myself? What websites can I build? Kind of building a portfolio of like, this is the stuff that I can do, in the hope that eventually the job world would turn around and view experience as the thing that they wanted. And a lot of part of this was, there wasn't always that. It was always in the back of my mind to have a job in software engineering. That's what I wanted, to leave the police eventually and do that. But I guess for me, it was just, I enjoyed doing the programming. I enjoyed learning new things. I enjoyed sort of building things. So it wasn't purely just, I want a job and I'm going to learn this. And I think that's probably quite an important point, because I think when just trying to do things for the sort of the monetary return of it, especially for the amount of time and amount of stuff you've got to learn in coding, to really get quite good at it, there's got to be more than just, I want to earn money from this. You've got to enjoy what you're doing. You've got to, and so there was just this sort of hunger just to learn as much as I could, so that I could get myself into a position where eventually it would pay off, really, I suppose, and I'd have the knowledge. To do that.
In terms of like the learning aspect of it, were there any like resources that you used when you were first starting out that you can specifically remember? That I don't know if you've maybe seen some recently that you would advise to anyone else looking to get into coding.
I mean, it's interesting now. So things have changed a lot, really. I mean, I guess when I first started, 99, 2000, there wasn't many online. There's no Stack Overflow, didn't exist. I mean, even you're talking, the iPhone didn't even come out till I think 2005. So this is like pre-smartphones. So mobile web wasn't really even a thing. You were still worried. You were still on dial-up, so you're still worried about keeping the web page down to like 30 or 40K. Whereas now it's almost like it's not really a worry. And so things have changed back then from what they are now. In terms of what probably nowadays, I mean, there's still some similarities about what I would recommend for people to do today, and I think it's still around the project-based things. I remember when we're in hiring mode, you do get quite a few people who would do the boot camps, and I think the boot camps are really useful. They are a bit more expensive to do, but I've worked with some really talented engineers that have come through boot camps, but I think they generally didn't. In the boot camps, you do these. You'll do these projects in the boot camps, but you can just spot them in people's GitHub repositories when they send that to you, that they've just gone through the process of following the instructions in the boot camp. And I think it should go in that extra mile beyond that, which is, to come up with some of your own ideas and build your own projects so that you can sort of prove that you've actually what you've learned and that you've proved the experience. And I guess back when I was starting, it was books mainly. If you wanted to learn something, you'd buy a book, because the internet just didn't have that many resources. Obviously nowadays it's completely different. You've got YouTube and sort of many resources to learn. The difference probably now is sorry, just one final point before you ask another one. But the difference now is the amount of stuff that you might want to learn. So back sort of 15, 20 years ago, and I know we talked about this the other day, actually, the full stack developer. And I know that's making a bit of a comeback, but back then full stack really meant you could do some kind of back-end programming language. You could do some sort of database, SQL or something like that. And you knew HTML, CSS, and a bit of JavaScript. That was a full stack developer. That developed, obviously, when the front end developed a lot and we started getting the front end frameworks, React and Next.js and that sort of thing, that became quite a complex thing on its own. And so the skills then, and I actually quite liked it when this happened, when the skills separated, because I was never a great fan of making things look good. I've not got a designer's eye. It's more the coding and more the technical stuff. So when someone told me, no, we've got someone that can do that bit, I was like, great, I'll just do the coding. Now I think we might be seeing a little bit of a, not necessarily a move back to the full stack, but it's definitely a skill that is probably wanted, because I guess it saves on by one person rather than two people. But there's just a lot more to learn nowadays than there probably was back then, if you want to learn the full breadth of building applications.
Like for example, a couple of the things that we're working on at the moment, I'd say actually majority of the companies that we work with and we hire for say it's a nice to have React or even some understanding of JavaScript. I would say a couple of years ago it was like back end or front end, but I guess times are fairly tough at the moment and companies are looking for ways to potentially save money. So if they can hire an engineer that can be a full stack engineer, then it potentially will save them. So it probably is a little bit tougher now with the full stack engineering side and how it might be coming back. So like Python, Django, React is usually what we're seeing with a lot of the roles at the moment.
I think there's probably also the you've got the both aspects of front end now as well, where you've got, we've seen people who can do Swift programming, Objective-C and stuff for iOS or Android, and they do the front end HTML, CSS. So they've got these sort of two quite big skills that can go quite nicely together. So you're not having to then get back end person, front end person, and a mobile developer. You get the mobile and the front end potentially in one as well.
Cool. Moving on to kind of your career progression and everything. You've obviously progressed into a hiring manager now as well, and obviously a coach. What do you kind of mainly look for when you are hiring software engineers?
That's quite a tough one, actually. So obviously there's two aspects to it. There's obviously the technical side of things. which is normally fairly standard. Does the person understand, if we're doing Python, do they understand the basic concepts of Python? Do they understand, the data structures, the conditional, all the sort of, can this person actually technically program? But I think beyond that, it really comes down to, can I work with this person? Is this person going to fit in with a team? Are they going to be someone that's sort of willing to? I don't like saying go the extra mile, because then it makes it feel like you want people to be working 24/7 and not expect to be paid for it. But for people to have that like just a good work ethic and a good sort of understanding of the responsibility of what they're working on. So where we get, and I've always been the same, if there's ever an error that you feel is you've done something wrong, you've caused a bug and there's some problem and production has just gone down, or there's a real issue, it's people taking that personal responsibility to feel responsible and to sort of come back in and fix it. So it's definitely both things. Both the technical is important, but the ability to work with people and yeah.
How do you kind of look for like work ethic in an interview? Because I guess it's fairly difficult to kind of see someone's work ethic. I guess you could ask them like previous experience to do with how they've overcome challenges or that kind of thing. But is there anything that you specifically would look for in an interview to assess that?
I mean, it is a tough one. It is a tough one with those things. I mean, some of it's quite hard to quantify, where if you're just in general conversation with someone, that you get a feeling about them and you're like, I really want to work with this person. We seem to gel and it seems to be a good fit. So sometimes just talking anecdotally about their experiences in the past, talking about where they've failed, where there has been a bug and what their reaction to that was, and what how they talk about that experience, can often be quite a good one. Because people never want to say, I don't like what's your biggest weakness, because you'll always get some sort of weird way of saying it's a weakness, but actually it's a strength. But to actually just say, like, where have you really screwed up? Like, where have you, and what did you do about it? And what happened after that? And what did you take from that? You can get a bit more insight into how they're thinking about what it is that they're doing and what their outlook is on that.
Nice. And on the kind of the progression side of things, you have progressed towards like the management and coaching aspect, I guess, within the last, what is it, 9 years, more?
I mean, probably the management side of things really has been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So just to sort of continue the story on, just to fill you up to present day, I left the police in 2006. Someone sort of took a chance on me and gave me a job. And then from that point, I was actually contracting, really. So from that point onwards, I was just contracting, quite long-term contracts. Didn't do very many very short-term ones. The shortest I ever did was 3 months, but mainly 2 or 3 year contracts. And the reason I did the contracting was because I really wanted work from home. We lived in Cornwall at the time, and obviously a lot of the jobs were up in London. We had a young family, and it was anything I could find that was remote, I would grab onto that and stick with it, for as long as I could. So I did this for, probably about 10 years. And then I lost a contract and really struggled to get another one. So that was at that point I decided to get back into permanent work, which was quite a jump, because at that point I then had to go to London. So I was then traveling to London during the week and working. But because of the thing with contracting is generally you can only progress to a certain level. So you can only really get to maybe senior engineer. And then when it gets to management and beyond that, it's not so easy to do that as a contractor, because people want permanent staff to better do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So once I made the move into permanent, it was then that I really decided, right, now I've got the experience, I've got plenty of experience here. I want to make the sort of move to progress my career in a management. But what I thought at the time, management, I mean, that's felt like the natural progression. And then as I started working in my first permanent role, the people there were identifying that giving me management responsibilities. It didn't hurt that I was a bit older. I think at this point I was early 40s, but probably a good 10 years older than the next oldest person in the office in my first role. back into permanent work. But once I'd started doing, on that track, then that's when I decided to sort of go as high as I could in the management sort of side of things.
Did you always want to manage then? Was that kind of from the start of you always wanted to lead and manage others?
No, it wasn't really an ambition at the start. I think as I got more experience, it became clear that I could. And then it just sort of felt like a natural progression into that. Where you find yourself in rooms and you just, well, maybe that's just me. I mean, I think I just sort of, not in a bad way, naturally take over a little bit, naturally sort of be the person of experience that says, well, let's look at this and let's look at that. And just sort of naturally took on that role. So it just sort of made sense after a while to go in that direction.
Could you touch on kind of your growth as a leader across the kind of different roles that you've had as well? Because obviously you've had a couple of different roles in management throughout your career. So yeah, how have you kind of progressed as a leader throughout those roles as well?
Sure, yeah. So in the first role back as permanent, I was senior engineer, but then with starting to get some management responsibilities. From then I moved to another company where I got an engineering manager's role. And I think that's where I really, doing that role is where I really learned the sort of the management side of things. And because it's quite an interesting switch when you go from engineer to manager, because you don't always, no one really teaches you in a way like, right, here's what you've got to do as a manager. You've got obviously your responsibilities in terms of people's, performance reports and one-to-ones and other things like that. But there's no real, there's no like, here's what you have to do. So you're just, to start with, you're sort of thinking, what's my value here? What am I up to? And then working in that engineering manager role really sort of helped me to get the hang of, sort of solidify that and get the hang of that.
Cool. Are there any kind of lessons that you would say stand out to you that you've learned throughout the years as managing and coaching others?
There's one thing that probably started off my sort of current thinking, really. My manager at the time, when I was an engineering manager, Lloyd, I think there was a point at which we were having a one-to-one and I was like, look, I'm not really quite sure what to do here. Like, how did you know what to do in this situation? And he said it was something like, I didn't, but I just make it up as I go along. And it was that sort of, we're just making it up as we, because at some point you get to a point in management where there is no one else to look to. And especially now as CTO, that there is no one above me, apart from the CEO, but there's no one really I can look to say, right, over to you. You do it, or you tell me what to do. It's on me. And I think I started to take that outlook around sort of, well, what's not just what should I do and what do the rules say or what do other people do? It's like, well, what do I want to do here? What would make sense for me to do here? And that ended up being the right thing, really, ultimately, because you come to realize that no one else really knows what they're doing either, and you'll just make the decisions, and then someone goes, that was a good, well done for making the decision. Not to say that all decisions would be correct, but at least you're taking it from a point of view of, well, someone has to make this decision, and it looks like it's me at the moment.
Do you think that's pretty tough as obviously a CTO being the highest level that you can get, obviously, other than the CEO? Do you think that's tough from like a mental perspective, having like no one above you to potentially, or I don't know if you seek advice elsewhere as like a CTO potentially?
It's sort of more, I did have a coach that worked with me in the company we're at now, or someone outside the company who was also another CTO, but was also a coach, which was really helpful just to have someone else, even just to reflect back to you, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm looking at doing, here's my issues, and not even just advising, but just either saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and have you thought of this, or even potentially sometimes saying, well, that doesn't sound like just giving you that something to bounce off of. But it's definitely a bit of a switch. I mean, when I from engineering manager, I moved to the company I'm at now, the role you got me, which is as a tech lead, and we had a CTO here already, and then how I got the CTO role was actually he actually left So I'd been here about a year, just over a year, and he left the role, and I sort of jumped into his seat. So at the time, as a tech lead, I'm sort of second in command. There were always those things, and it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't prepared to make a decision on something, but it was always like, well, I probably should let this feels like something the CTO should be deciding, and I don't want to take that away from, I don't want to be making a decision and just usurping him completely. So the things would then go to him. But then once you become CTO, that is you. When something happens and it's like, and so to start with, the switch is like, oh, okay, now it's me. There's no one else going to give the answer here. I've got to figure it out for myself. But that I think that goes, or for me, it certainly went fairly quickly. You soon get used to that idea. It probably helps being a parent as well, because you soon get into that position of you look around looking for another adult, and you realise that you are the adult, and that you're on your own. So maybe that helps.
Yeah. I'm not there yet. I'll have to come to you for some advice, some coaching advice for the kids in the future. We've obviously chatted a little bit about the kind of leadership and management side and coaching and everything. Obviously, you have just brought out the book as well. So if you want to run through kind of what the motivations were around that as well, and maybe a little bit more information, and give yourself a little bit of self-promotion as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think I've been, personal development has been something that's been of interest to me for probably a good 10 years. I started doing coaching outside of the organization as well. So I started to coach other people, and I was getting coaching myself. And I guess one thing that, that leadership was something that I guess I thought more about it over the years, especially as I became, the tech lead and the CEO, CTO, that I sort of thought more about, my philosophy around leadership. And then I started writing more on LinkedIn, writing articles and sort of newsletters and posts, and getting more into that. And I thought it'd be good to try and solidify some of those ideas into a book. It's Deep Executive Leadership from the Inside Out. I think where this came from really was probably going back to the idea of, making it up as you go along. The idea of there are leadership books on, how you should do it, or leadership techniques and that sort of thing. And I wanted to try and approach it from a different angle, which was what is it that we can, on a personal development level, what is it that we can look at within ourselves? What's our sort of underlying beliefs and values? And to be aware of that, and aware of how we impact other people, and aware of how they think, and so on and so forth, and how that will actually inform the way that you lead people. So rather than it coming from an external point of view of here's how you do it, and here's the rules, and here's tick all the boxes, and then you'll be a leader. To have that be, leadership from within you, and then that informs your decisions and your choices, and how you act and treat other people. And in a lot of ways, while obviously you've got to do a bit of work to sort of look inside and think, well, what do I really think about this, and be aware of your own feelings and emotions, and therefore maybe more aware of other people's feelings and emotions. It actually eventually becomes easier, because you don't have to think, well, what was that thing I read in a book, or what was that thing I did in that course that time? Because it's just, well, what do I want to do? What makes sense for me here? What makes sense for other people? And so that the book sort of goes into that and talks about that.
Are there any kind of key insights that you'd be able to give within the book? I know obviously people will probably want to read it, but is there anything kind of you could do to tease anyone?
I mean, I can cover the basic. The book's in two parts really. So the first part is really I created a framework for this sort of inside out leadership, which was really around creation of self, self-awareness and management, creation of others, and awareness of others. So it really starts with what's inside of you, what your beliefs and values are, what your how you can create, how you can sort of create yourself and create the way that you are, rather than being just affected by all the external stuff that comes in. What is it you can bring up from yourself? And then it looks into we look into then self-awareness and the awareness of other people, knowing what you know about yourself, what's going on with other people, and how you're interacting with them. and then into the creation of other people. And by that I mean how really the way that you relate to other people is almost like a creation in your own mind. If you go into a meeting and you think this is going to be a terrible meeting, this person's not very nice, or I just don't get on with this person, they're terrible, you're going to come into the meeting with a far different mindset than if you say, look, I'm going to have an open mind. This person just wants the best for the company, and I appreciate that they're maybe a bit more aggressive, but I can deal with that. You're going to come into that meeting differently, and the outcome is likely to be different. Not that anything's changed other than what you're thinking inside your head. And then in the last 4 chapters, there's some just more examples around sort of person-centered, human-centered leadership, which is really, I mean, that's probably my sort of main leadership philosophy, which is around the people that work for you and the people that you're leading, rather than being, the person that cracks the whip from the outside and gets them to do things. It's really about what is it you can do for them. Because if you can clear the path for them, if you're the person that protects them from maybe, things further up the chain, you're the person that can help them develop their careers. If you're the person that can, that can sort of chip in and sort of help them do what they're doing, rather than you just sort of telling them what to do, then they're automatically gonna, if you've hired the right people, automatically gonna just perform better anyway. You don't need to be micromanaging everything that they do, because if you give them the environment where they can thrive and where they can enjoy what they're doing, and where they can be given, empower them to do what they want to do and what they need to do, what you've hired them for, what they're great at, then they're going to this is going to be much better for the company than if you're going to be a micromanaging, whip cracking tyrant.
Yeah. Is there any kind of principles that, I mean, from the book, that as you were writing it, that you've now implied more into kind of your leadership and coaching style then? I guess, yeah, as you were writing it, is there anything you're going, now I'm like definitely going to be using that in my, I guess, management career? Or
no, I think because it went the other way around, and I was already doing that stuff, and then I was writing it. But what it did do, I guess, is that it sort of helped really sort of solidify some of these ideas, and quite a lot of this stuff. You can talk academically and sort of logically about these things, but it's whether you really sort of embody those things, whether that comes out in a in your sort of naturally and automatically in your everyday dealings with other people and with the business and those sorts of things. And I think that probably happened a bit more as well. Not to say, it's a sort of a constant journey, but a lot of this stuff, personal development certainly is a constant journey. And I think leadership as well, because there are still times, I'm not going to get things right 100% of the time. Yes, I've written a book about it. Yes, I coach people. It doesn't mean I'm infallible. And so there's always things that I might do that I would then look back, in retrospect, and look at and think, well, why did I do that, or why did I react in the way that I reacted to this? What else is there for me to look at, and how can I be better next time, and how can I not do this next time, or how can I improve? So it's always a constant sort of cycle of improvement.
Yeah, and you touched on kind of the self-development thing there as well. Is there anything that you've done or that you've read that you would recommend to others for self-development, looking to get into specifically leadership or management positions?
Ooh, throw me a curveball there, and I've got to try and think of books that I've read now. So probably, I don't think I've really read that much in terms of actual management and leadership books. There's a book called, I think it's called Coaching for Performance, and I'm trying to think who it's by now. But in that, it talks a lot about coaching as a sort of as a modality as a leader. So being a sort of a leader coach, rather than just a dictatorial kind of command and control approach. So that talks about the coaching and the leadership side of things. So that was quite an interesting read. I'll try, and if I've got it here, so if I can afterwards, I can post it in the in LinkedIn.
From my perspective, I would say, so my manager's a huge Man United fan, and apparently I've not read the book, but Sir Alex Ferguson's book was pretty insightful. There's things like How to Win Friends and Influence People that I guess that can help with. It's a common one, but that can help with getting insights into the people that are reporting into you, and truly kind of understanding them. Because I guess a big part of management is trust, and obviously understanding the people that are working for you can go quite a long way with helping performance and things like that as well. I don't know what.
And I guess and the empathy as well, having the empathy for other people, because and having the right perspective. I mean, I've posted on LinkedIn before about managers or maybe CEOs who might have the perspective of, these people work for me, they should be grateful they've got a job because I'm paying them their wages. But if you take that perspective, then you're always going to feel like everyone's ungrateful, and whenever anyone asks for anything, they're ungrateful. And it's just a perspective shift, If you take the opposite perspective of, well, I've hired really good people, they could leave at any moment, and then I haven't got a business because I've got no one to work here with me, and the people are the business. So it's I think sort of perspective and that emotional intelligence of knowing that, putting yourself in other people's shoes. People often forget that, if you felt something at some point because someone did something to you or said something to you in a certain way at work, then you can, as long as you can extrapolate that and say, well, if I say this something, someone else is going to feel what I felt, and I don't want that. Then I think that can go a long way.
Yeah. Is there kind of like one thing you could say? I know obviously you've come from the non-academic background, but is there anything in terms of advice that you'd give to someone who, say it's you 20 years ago, and you're looking to get to where you are now? What would you recommend to someone looking to get to where you are?
What you mean before coding?
Before coding, someone that says, I want to be a software engineer and also then want to become a leader, a CTO in the future at some point.
I mean, it's quite a journey anyway, just from the beginning to say I want to be a CTO before you can code. But I mean, certainly to start off with the first part with being a software engineer, really, it's just about, do you enjoy the sort of building of things? Do you enjoy the sort of learning? Because you're going to have to learn a lot of stuff. Do you enjoy it? And just one thing just to say as well, maths and things doesn't often. People always say to me, are you really good at maths then? People who don't do coding, and it's actually like, no, I'm not that great. I can do maths, but maybe like A-level standard just about. But beyond that, you don't need a degree in maths, because there's not a lot of actual maths in web development, programming. Not saying for everything. If you want to get to data science, absolutely do the maths. But from just a purely engineering perspective, it's not always so important. And I think just build stuff. From the software engineering side, just build stuff that interests you, or build stuff that, build a clone of Facebook just for yourself, something small, because the amount of stuff that you'll learn from trying to build like a real world project will be, I think will be indispensable. If you can work with someone else doing it, even better, because then that's another big part of software engineering, that not just the actual process of coding something and building something yourself, but the process of how do you do that with other people? How do you do source control? How do you deal with something like, a tool like Jira, where you're sort of planning? How do you do sprints and Scrum and Agile and all those kinds of things? It goes as much into software engineering as purely the coding itself. So the more you can get experience of that, the better, really. The more you can build your own portfolio.
Yeah. And then moving on to kind of the leadership side as well, what kind of, as a whole, advice would you give to get from a software engineer? You've already got into the software engineering side of things from kind of an unconventional background, but then how do you then progress again into kind of the leadership side?
I think for early on, I think it's good to always to have a voice when you're working, because I think some people tend to, or some people can just sort of fade into the background, be sort of told what to do, and not really question it, or not really sort of speak up in terms of, well, I think we should build it like this, because they think maybe that they're not, what they're going to say isn't valuable, or what they're going to say is going to be silly or something like that. And I think initially is building that confidence of, I've got some experience now, and I've got this idea, and I'm going to say something about it, and I'm going to put my ideas forward to other people. I'm going to partake in these discussions. I think that's a good first step to start to being into position, because the more that you speak about stuff, even within your company, the more you'll be seen as the sort of person who knows what they're talking about, who could be sort of a leader on a team, or going further. Not that someone who doesn't speak doesn't have the skills, but it just isn't apparent to everybody else. That can be the problem sometimes. So just to get out your comfort zone a little bit, if that's something that worries you, depending on where you work as well. If you've got the ability, so 2 companies ago, I worked somewhere that had quite a large engineering team, sort of 40, 50 engineers. Everything was divided into squads of sort of 5 or 6 engineers. And so a good way there, and we would often do it, who can lead this squad for this next sort of 5 or 6 sprints that we're going to do. And then that person would be involved in the planning, the architecture, looking at the resources, writing the tickets, and doing that sort of almost management side of, for that period of time. So wherever you can get into a position where you, not even if it's not like a promotion or a completely different role, where can you start to lead, even in small ways, where you currently are? Because all of that, then, at some point you then might want to either get promotion where you are to engineering manager or something like that, whatever the next step up. Usually that's the next, from senior engineer, that's usually the next step if you're going management track. There are some companies actually do have like a staff engineer track if you're not interested in managing people. But either way, you're still leading in a technical perspective anyway. You're still the person that says, here's what I think we should do. Here's the direction I think we should go in. So the more you can get yourself into those situations, the more evidence really you'll have for either promotion or even a move to another company on a promotion, because you can say, well, all right, this is my first move into this engineering manager role, but hey, look, I was a senior engineer and I did this, and this, and here's how I dealt with the people. So I've basically, if you can almost be in a position where you've almost been doing the job that you're applying for,
yeah,
but without the title.
Yeah, nice, cool. I think we've had a few questions in the chat, so we might be able to just run through a couple of those. So Ruben has asked, as a self-taught software developer with 5 years of experience, I'll put it up on the bottom there. How can I increase the chances of getting better jobs? Because it feels like most companies want a degree almost immediately, and it boosts your job applications because of the lack of the degree. I know
boots your job. I can see what you're saying, that as soon as it goes in, it basically gets binned by the recruiters because you don't fulfill the the basic requirements. So that's all. It's your fault, Josh. Basically, you're binning these people's applications. Interesting that the exact same issue that I had 20 years ago, that other people are having now, where companies are wanting degrees. I think you often find, I've seen anyway, where it is a degree, it's often a degree or equivalent experience is quite often accepted. I think there are things you can do within the company, I guess, to, as I just talked about, to try and to ask for more responsibility, to ask for what else can you do, to at least get the experience where you currently are before maybe looking for other, for a promotion or for other roles. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything you can do outside the company as well, in terms of the management stuff, is harder, I guess, outside the company, because when you're early on in your career, you can create projects, you can come up with with your own small startups where you're building tech, and that becomes your portfolio. But the portfolio is obviously, for management, is going to be harder. So from the leadership perspective, if you can build on that within the company that you're in, and then I guess it's down to the recruiters, really. Most recruiters will, if you can get to talk to a recruiter, and probably Josh probably better speak more about this than I can. You know, if you can speak to the recruiter and convince the recruiter that actually, yes, you don't have a degree, but you've got, because a degree often doesn't, unless you're doing something really super technical, that the only place you can really learn that stuff is in a degree. A degree doesn't really give you that much advantage over someone who's had 5 years, 5 years experience as a Python engineer or 5 years at university doing a master's.
Mm.
The master's is not going to, unless you're doing something like in, data science and something that really needs it. And if you can talk to the recruiter, you can probably get, because the recruiter then it becomes the gatekeeper to, okay, well, I'll send your CV on.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, I've placed a fair number of self-taught software engineers, I mean, yourself included, before. And I think the key difference between a lot of them is the kind of the confidence to, when I'm on the phone with them, to put me forward and put them forward to roles and kind of explain the stuff that they have done and how it does match up to different roles. It kind of instills the confidence in the recruiter as well to then put you forward for a role. There's been countless times when you kind of look at someone's CV and the client that we're working with is that they're pretty strict on, we want a STEM degree, or we want like a computer science degree with this number of years of experience. But as someone looking for a job, if you can then try and convince the recruiter, that's going to convince the recruiter to go and speak to the hiring manager and be like, look, can we give this person a chance? I placed someone, one of my first placements was a guy who had a war studies degree. And it was just the way that he spoke to me. It was like, I was like, I need to take a chance on this guy. I'll send him forward. He got rejected 2 or 3 times initially. And because he'd already made me confident about his abilities, I pushed back 3 times. And I said, why don't we just send this guy the tech test? And he passed the tech test, passed all the interviews and got offered, and we placed him. And that's kind of the difference between someone that, a recruiter, I guess, is the main reason potentially for that. Because I know a lot of companies that they don't really want to waste their time with people that are self-taught. So if you can go through a recruiter, I would always suggest that, because it can be the difference between you getting a job or not. So yeah, Ruben, that kind of answers that question as well. There's one from Demetrius as well. So joined late because I was at a course at uni. Recently started the CS53 course, Harvard. I found it quite easy because I'm already a computer science student at my local university. Is the free certificate worth it, or should I have paid for the verified one? Don't know what your thoughts would be on that, Stuart.
I mean, again, it comes down to the, does it make a difference to the recruiter or the company that you're applying for that you've got the certificate or not? I mean, if on the CV you said I completed this course, I imagine it's quite rare that they want to see the actual certificate.
Yeah, it depends really. I think if you're in an interview and you could say I've done this course, this extra course, that potentially could be the difference between them hiring you or another candidate. But again, I
don't know whether it depends on what stage it's at. I mean, on your CV, it'll say I've done this course, and that might be enough for them to go, oh, cool, he's done the course, we'll speak to him. Yeah. Once you're on the interview, they're probably not they may not ask about, or they may just question it. But if you've got through that far, if you then say, I did the course, I audited the course, completed it, it was great, but I just decided not to do the thing. I think it's unlikely by the time you get to that point that they go, oh, you haven't got the certificate. Well, we're not interested then. You've already got through the door. Would be my take on it. Although I don't want to, if you're thinking of buying it, I don't want to be the reason why you didn't get a job. So,
I think I'm the same for, even if it's just a course, or to be honest, even master's degrees now as well. I would always advise if I'm working with a candidate and they've already got their bachelor's, going in to do a master's degree in exactly the same computer science subject, it usually isn't really the difference between a company hiring one person over another. And to be honest, salary is pretty much going to be the same if someone's got a bachelor's degree or master's degree. And I guess from yourself and your experience, that the experience is more worthwhile than potentially even having the degree anyway.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, because often we, especially as engineers, if we're interested in all these things, we'll take a whole bunch of different things, online courses, free courses, paid courses, and it all adds up. It builds a picture, from the CV or from even when you get to interview, from the interviewer's perspective, it builds this picture of someone that, this is a person that really wants to learn, that's continuing to learn, even though they're a computer science student and they're doing this on top of that. That to me would say, well, this person's actually really interested in what they're doing here. So it helps to build that bigger picture.
Cool. Next one is from Daniel. So Daniel said, what's your suggestions to write a cover letter which is compelling, to the point, and at the same time honest? From time to time happens that you can pick up on technologies used by companies, but you cannot mention those in your CV cover letter since you've not worked with them. So don't know if you want to go first on this one.
I'm going to hand this all over to you, this one.
All right.
But all right, I can take it just that there are times when we do recruitment directly. So we do it directly on LinkedIn. Pretty much ignore the cover letters. I've got to be honest. I don't think I've really read a cover letter. You just go straight to the CV, just have a look. What's the person's experience? Does it match with what we're looking for? We might go back to the CV. We might go back to the cover letter if we saw something interesting. But you can mostly cover you can make your CVs quite interesting. Actually, we've had a few that stood out where we had, I can't remember what it was now. Guy telling us about various hobbies that were like really interesting hobbies, and we're like, this seems like a really interesting guy, and it changed him in our minds. But sorry, I'll let you talk about the actual cover letter, Josh.
No, I was going to say I agree on the cover letter side. I would go as far as if you are very keen on working for a company and you can see that they're using certain technologies from the job spec, why not spend a couple of hours potentially doing something in your own time, creating a little web app or something that uses some of those technologies, and on your CV you can put that in your personal projects section on your CV and explain kind of how that links up to the specific company. So cover letters for me, I've not actually ever seen companies really requiring them. And to be honest, like you said, as a hiring manager, you probably wouldn't even look at the cover letter yourself. So
another point that might be worth raising here, I'm not sure if you recommend this to people, but there's nothing wrong with having multiple CVs. There's nothing wrong with actually having a CV that's customized purely for this one job that you're applying for, rather than just having one CV that goes out to everybody. If you want to focus on something different for a particular job application, nothing wrong with just having multiple versions of your CV that just highlight that aspect over maybe other aspects, or
So we've actually had a couple of things come through. Jan has just mentioned on LinkedIn as well. So Sanjay has asked, would like to know the most important steps in the path to become a CTO. I'm a software engineer already with 14 years of experience. So what are the most important steps to becoming a CTO? I know we obviously touched on a couple of it, but maybe if you could summarize for Sanjay.
Yeah, so obviously we talked about, from a senior engineer to really get that management, or that if you want to go to CTO, it's that management responsibility as much as you can. There isn't really, so I'm a CTO of a relatively smallish startup. There are CTOs of Microsoft, Facebook, where there's 20,000 employees, but far different job. I don't know whether I'll give it a crack. But I think it's such a far different job for me. Equally, there are CTOs who are maybe 2 or 3 person company, and actually the CTO is just the senior engineer or the only engineer potentially at the company. So there's a couple of ways into it. Either you can go up the ranks, engineering manager, senior engineering manager, VP of engineering, head of engineering, and all those sorts of things, and work your way up that way. Or you can go straight into being a CTO of a small company and hope they become a big company, and then you're CTO straight away. There are other aspects of being a CTO that I probably didn't touch on really, that probably differ from things like head of engineering. So as a CTO, it's probably more of a strategic role in terms of, so I'm obviously on the management committee with the company. So I'm far more involved about the decisions that the company makes. Obviously with tech in mind, but those sort of high level decisions, and I'm in charge of software engineering and data science as well. Whereas things like head of engineering, you might just be in charge of, and that could be quite a large engineering force, that you've got. But that can almost fulfill what you're looking for anyway. You've got the management side of things, and to be honest, in terms of the pay as well, if you're looking at pay scales, CTO, head of engineering are actually quite similar. And the other thing about CTO, I mean, obviously I got into my role because I got promoted within a company. I imagine there's less CTO roles out there just because there are just less CTOs. It's I shouldn't say dead man's shoes, isn't it? You can't get the job until someone leaves the job. Whereas maybe for things like VP of engineering, you might have a company with a few more of those. So there's definitely an element of luck to it, but get as much experience as you can. And until you find a point where you can move up to there.
Yeah, I liked what you said earlier in terms of becoming a lead engineer from a standard software engineer. It's how can you try and take ownership and step up in certain projects. So even if you're a senior or mid-level dev, it's over a course of however many sprints. If you can be the person to say, I want to lead this specific project, and you're not necessarily the lead engineer, but go as far as doing that, and then you have some sort of leadership aspects that makes you obviously more interesting from a hiring manager's point of view to becoming a lead engineer. And then obviously as you're a lead engineer, that's kind of how you can then just work your way up. I'm not saying necessarily job hop, but that there are certain ways around. Sometimes that's what you have to do to potentially become a CTO eventually, if that's kind of the end goal. And I'd say like software engineers move around on average every 18 months anyway. I'm not saying move every 18 months. You do have to have some sort of longevity within the roles that you're working in, but that could potentially be quite a good progression path to becoming a CTO.
Yeah, definitely. And I did do just that. I did job hop a bit, right or wrong, but there was a point at which I realized I had, and I think the chap that just mentioned it had 14 years experience. There was a point at which I was just like, look, I could be a CTO now. I think I've got the experience to be a CTO, or at least head of engineering, but I can't just make the jump from senior engineer to head of engineering. It would be quite difficult. So it's like, well, what's the best way? I can't progress here, so I'm going to move over here. And then I think I did like 18 months, and then I switched after 18 months. I think like you just said, about 18 months. And then I was tech lead for a year, and then CTO. But there's definitely, if you sort of stick in for places for 3 to 4 years, again, nothing wrong with that. But if there's no room for progression where you are, and it's not a bad, if that's the real reason why you're leaving, when someone says, why are you leaving this place? And you say, well, look, I've got ambitions. I want to be a head of engineering and CTO. I think I'm capable of it. But where I am now, I can't support that there is nowhere else for me to go. I can't progress any further where I am. So my only option to progress is to move. And I've never had anyone question that.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we're coming up to the hour mark, so for some time, it's kind of whizzed by. But obviously, thank you for coming on. One of the kind of things I wanted to get you to say was kind of where people could potentially find the book, and obviously, I know you've got your coaching and kind of consultancy, executive coach side of things as well. yeah, where can everyone kind of find that information if they're interested?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I've got a website, stuartmarsh.org. Obviously on LinkedIn, in both places is a link to book a discovery call with me if you're interested in coaching on a one-to-one basis, which I do. I'm also launching a group program probably in the new year, which is around entrepreneurs and leaders mindset, which is going to be a joint video course and group coaching sessions for about 8 weeks.
Cool.
Yeah, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and if you want to talk more.
We'll put the links in the comments as well for all of the information and the book and everything as well. And then just for everyone else as well, if you kind of follow Understanding Recruitment as well, so you can kind of keep in touch or for kind of future LinkedIn lives that we do, that would be brilliant as well. But yeah, thanks a lot, Stuart, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. See you in a bit.
Cheers.